There comes a moment in a woman's life when every voice goes silent, every door closes, and she finds herself standing alone in a place she never asked to be. But what if this silence isn't abandonment? What if it's the very ground where God begins rewriting the story she thought was falling apart? Stay with me, because the season you fear the most might be the one heaven is using to rebuild you. There comes a moment in a woman's life when the people she once trusted slowly drift out of the frame. The calls stop, the familiar voices fade. The room that was once full becomes unbearably quiet. And for the first time, she realizes she is standing alone, not abandoned, but invited. Because when everyone else steps out, God steps in. Not with thunder, not with noise, but with a presence so steady it fills the spaces others left behind. What feels like loss is often the beginning of a holy encounter. God does not remove people to punish her. He clears the room so she can finally see the one who never leaves. He lets the noise die down so his whisper becomes unmistakable. He allows the wrong hands to release her so she can feel the strength of his. In the stillness, she discovers a truth every chosen woman eventually learns. Isolation is not empty. It is sacred. It is alignment. It is the doorway where God steps closer, rewriting the story she thought was falling apart. What looks like separation is actually preparation, the quiet beginning of her becoming. When the noise of her old life finally fades, something begins to awaken inside her, something she didn't even know she was missing. For the first time in a long time, she can actually hear herself breathe. She can feel her soul settling, and in that quiet, she hears what she was never able to hear before, the whisper of God. It doesn't rush in, it doesn't shout. It rises slowly, like dawn breaking through a long night. The distractions that once drowned out his voice are gone now. The conversations that once shaped her identity have gone silent. And in that stillness, she is led back to the voice that formed her in the first place. Her prayers shift from routine to necessity. Scripture stops being something she reads out of obligation and becomes something she devours out of hunger. She no longer searches for clarity in people. She seeks it in heaven. And in that sacred exchange, she begins to rediscover who she really is. Not someone's fallback plan, not someone's second choice, but a daughter deeply seen, deeply known, deeply held. What she thought was silence was actually God speaking the loudest. As she walks deeper into this quiet season, she begins to notice something she never expected. The things she once leaned on are gone. The routines she trusted, the plans she crafted, the people she depended on. All of it suddenly feels out of reach. At first it feels like collapse, but slowly she realizes it's training. God isn't punishing her. He's removing the crutches that kept her from discovering the strength he placed inside her from the beginning. She used to rely on voices that told her who she was. She used to cling to predictability, control, approval, comfort. But those things were never meant to carry her. They were only meant to accompany her. And now that they've been stripped away, she finds something she never thought she had: the ability to stand. Not because she is strong on her own, but because God is teaching her how to walk with Him instead of walking with fear. He feeds her differently now. He stretches her faith, not to break her, but to free her. What looked like loss becomes liberation. What felt like falling apart becomes the moment she finally rises. There comes a point when the weight of everything she's been carrying finally breaks her open. Not in a way that destroys her, but in a way that reveals what she was never able to see while life was loud. The pain she once feared becomes the very place where God begins to shape her. It is in the aching, in the tears she hides, in the questions she whispers into the dark, that heaven leans closest. Pain no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes a teacher, sharp, honest, unignorable. It strips away what is shallow and brings her face to face with what is real. Like Hannah, misunderstood and heartbroken, she discovers that her cries don't chase God away. They draw him near. Her suffering becomes the altar where something new is conceived, something holy that could only be formed through surrender. Some prayers only rise from broken places. Some breakthroughs only come after something inside her is shattered. And as the pieces fall, she realizes God isn't crushing her, he's refining her. Pain becomes the doorway. Surrender becomes the turning point. And what she thought would break her becomes the very thing that births her purpose. As the world around her grows quiet, she begins to notice something she hadn't seen in years. Herself. Not the version shaped by expectations, not the woman molded by opinions, not the identity built from roles she was never meant to carry, but her true self, the one God crafted long before life tried to rewrite her. When the voices that once defined her fall silent, God's voice rises with clarity. He becomes her mirror, and for the first time, she sees herself the way he always did, chosen, seen, becoming. She is no longer measured by who stayed or who left, by what she lost or what she failed to be. She is measured by the hands that formed her. In the solitude, she starts to recognize pieces of the women God used throughout Scripture reflected in her own soul. The courage of Esther, the loyalty of Ruth, the resilience of Deborah, the surrender of Mary. She realizes she is not fading. She is being revealed. Her loneliness becomes her classroom. Her silence becomes her soil, and in that hidden place, she blooms, quietly, faithfully, fearlessly, into the woman God always knew she could be. As the days pass in silence, her faith begins to shift. It is no longer the kind of faith built on comfort or convenience, the kind that rises only when life feels gentle. It becomes something heavier, deeper, forged in the unseen fires of solitude. She starts to carry a faith that does not depend on outcomes, but on the unchanging character of God Himself. This is the kind of faith that grows only in hidden places, the kind that learns to stand even when heaven feels quiet, the kind that whispers, "I trust you," even when nothing makes sense. She no longer panics when people leave. She's survived that. She no longer trembles when storms rise. She's weathered worse. And she no longer interprets God's silence as abandonment. She knows now that silence often means trust. Her faith becomes unshakable, not because life gets easier, but because she has learned who stands with her in every valley. What once unsettled her no longer moves her. She becomes steady, anchored, dangerous to the darkness. Because you cannot intimidate a woman who has already walked through the fire and refused to let go of her praise. And then, in the quietest stretch of her journey, something miraculous begins to unfold. Not around her, but within her. What she once called loneliness begins to feel different, almost holy. She realizes this season is not a delay, not a punishment, not a forgotten corner of her life. It is a womb, a sacred, hidden place where God is forming something that could never be shaped in the open. Just as Elizabeth was hidden for months While carrying a purpose too precious for public eyes, this woman discovers that God sometimes conceals what he intends to reveal beautifully. She isn't being ignored, she's being incubated. She isn't overlooked, she's being overshadowed by God's hand. The silence around her is not rejection, it is protection. Every tear, every night alone, every whispered prayer has been part of a divine blueprint. God hides the women he plans to use. He separates the ones he plans to elevate. He isolates the ones he plans to anoint. And she begins to see it clearly now. She is not being set aside. She is being set apart. What she thought was breaking her is actually building her. And when she emerges from this hidden season, she will be unstoppable. When a woman reaches the point where she has no one left but God, something extraordinary begins. She doesn't crumble. She transforms. The silence that terrified her becomes the place she meets God's whisper. The pain that threatened to break her becomes the tool that refines her. The isolation she once hated becomes the womb where purpose is formed. And slowly, she discovers the truth. She was never alone. She was being shaped, strengthened, aligned. God was removing what couldn't go with her, so he could build what would carry her into her calling. When she steps out of this hidden season, she will not be the same woman who entered it. She will walk with a quieter spirit, a sharper vision, and a faith the world cannot shake. She will rise anointed, appointed, unmistakably chosen. If you feel lost, forgotten, or unseen, hear this. You are not behind. You are being built. You are not breaking. You are becoming. And when God brings you out, you will be unstoppable.